All right, we might have some more people join us, but let's go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, I'm Angela Evans from the Solutions Journalism Network. We're so happy today to have Resolve Philly's Modifier team present this webinar for y'all and for our entire network actually. So this will be recorded and posted on our website. Just wanted to give everyone a heads up. If you do contribute, which we hope you do, and talk and are on camera, just know that it will be posted afterwards. And with that, I will turn it over to the Modifier team. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, folks. We're with the community engagement team and presenting through the Modifier initiative, which is consulting arm of Resolve Philadelphia. Really, we're just going to give some context to our approach doing community engagement work in journalism. Hopefully, you'll walk away with some practical tips, best practices you can start integrating into your work later today, tomorrow. Also touch on, our work with 3 newsrooms through SJN's labor cohort and that better support their solutions reporting related to labor issues in their communities. A case study presented by Gary Bradley Lopez of the Kansas City Beacon, and wrap up from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I guess everybody said good afternoon. I just say hello because I'm not sure where everybody's at. Before we get started with our approach and our practices, we want you to get to know who we are. So I'll start off with giving a little background of how I even became Director of Community Engagement at Resolve. I'm Derrick Cain. So in 2009, I was sentenced to a 10-year mandatory minimum in a federal prison. In 2011, 2 years after I was sentenced, I was featured in an article about the surge of mandatory minimum sentences. The following week after the piece was published, a gentleman wrote in the Daily News comment section, and he wrote in there that I was not a good son or husband, that I certainly wasn't a good father, and that I was just a drug dealer. Now, I couldn't believe how someone could make those inaccurate comments about somebody they didn't even know. So yes, I did make some bad decisions, and those comments were definitely not true. So from that moment on, I focused on changing my narrative. So fast forward into 2017, I came home from prison and decided to get into prison reform, advocate for prison reform. And I was introduced to a criminal justice journalism fellowship. That's where I met co-executive director Jean Friedman-Radulski. She was doing a solutions journalism workshop. And when she did the workshop, that really resonated with me because I didn't want to just talk about the problem. I wanted to talk about solutions. So I saw that they were hiring for an engagement editor, and I decided to throw my name in the hat. And I've been at Resolve now since 2019.
And I'm Jingyao, the program manager on our community engagement team. My background is in immigrant serving nonprofit sector here in Philadelphia. And so I was accustomed to doing a lot of storytelling as a form of educating different systems so that their programs were more accessible to immigrant and other excluded communities. And I really took that to inform the work, my current role here at Resolve, how I engage and build relationships, and then ultimately help elevate narratives with and for various communities throughout Philadelphia. I think a lot about visibility, probably has to do with my own experience as an Asian woman in the United States, how it can be a privilege, a weapon, a barrier, depending on who and the context. And also think about it in terms of, ability to engage with local news and media when it comes to accessing news and information.
Hi, I'm Valerie Dowret. I use she, they, and he pronouns. I am an editorial associate on the community engagement team with Derrick and Jingyao. I work on creating connections with communities and reporting on those communities. Often these things are linked. I found that I have a traditional background in journalism. I went to J school, and I found that the journalism code of ethics that we were taught in J school often sometimes harms folks. So now I'm really forging my own code of ethics as I do work, and also just trying to show up as a better human when I interact with people who I interview.
So today we're really presenting through our Modifier initiative, Resolve Philly's home for practice change and professional development, otherwise, our consulting arm. And for those who may not be familiar with Resolve Philly, we are a Philadelphia, Pennsylvania-based journalism organization, which exists to challenge the field of journalism to be more equitable, collaborative, and informed by community voices and solutions. we are a pretty unique organization, I would say, that does a lot of things, journalism support, like the work of Modifier. But not just that, we're also doing original editorial content through community text and community-empowered newsletter, and work directly with newsrooms through our newsroom collaborative, Broken Philly, as you may be familiar with. Our work, though, really centers on improving how misrepresented communities are served and covered by media. Oftentimes, we're thinking about shifting the framing, what if reporting on to reporting for and with communities. So, thinking about who's telling the story, who has the agency to be a storyteller, and how it affects the flow of news and information to different communities.
Yeah, our community engagement team, or what we like to call ourselves the CE team, really grounds our work on all 4 of our initiatives. Our role centers the narratives of the lived experiences of Philadelphians. We ensure that authentic representation of communities that have been excluded from the news cycle. We're navigators doing deep community engagement. That's what we say. We call ourselves navigators. We do this work for the local newsrooms and communities throughout the city of Philadelphia, educating both sides by navigating those complex relationships between communities and newsrooms.
Yes, and we understand that community engagement can be a vague term. We all have different perspectives about what community engagement means. We'll soon share our own definition of community engagement, but first, we want to hear from you guys about what community engagement means to you. We're going to invite you to join different breakout groups. When you break out into groups, identify who will be the person to report back what y'all have discussed when we come and share back.
You'll have about 8 minutes in your group to talk, and we want to head straight into conversation. So if you haven't, in the chat, drop name, pronouns, affiliation. If you're a freelancer, that's cool too. And we'll see you in about 8 minutes. Looking at the size. Share screen. Okay. Your own back. All right. Do we have any representatives for ShareBack?
I'm representing our group, so I can go if you want. Okay, I'll go. Yes, so in our group, we had a diverse group that included a freelancer, people who are working in one person who's working for an organization that focuses on Black communities and in Atlanta. We had another person. Anyway, it was a very diverse group. And what we talked about were sort of 2 things. One, I work for a more corporate media company, which the Sacramento Bee is owned by McClatchy, and another person also commented on this, that among corporate media, there's how we measure engagement, or what engagement is understood to be, is a little bit nebulous, because some of the engagement work doesn't appear sort of on quarterly reports in terms of growth or page views. But I think we all saw the importance in it, and there were several newsrooms that talked about, one was I think I have names written down. I'm looking up the other sheet of paper. Yeah, I think Madeline talked about how there's an engagement editor and an engagement reporter in her newsroom, and that person goes out and goes to a lot of meetings and brings back a digest of what to discuss, or what is on the minds of the people at neighborhood planning meetings and various events where people are gathering. And it sounds like also the Kansas City Beacon has a similar sort of, Gary talked about how they have a similar model with community engagement representatives. So it seems like there's some newsrooms with active engagement roles where engagement is the main focus.
Thanks for that. And I think we'll maybe just do one more, and hopefully we'll have room towards the end where folks can just have like a dialogue about what is engagement in journalism. So Kenya, please.
Did you say my name? You said Kenya?
Yes, is that correct?
Yes, no, that's correct. I just wasn't sure if I heard you. Hi everyone, I'm Kenya. I'm the health reporter at Capital B Atlanta. I was in a group with my colleague Angel Bond. I was in a group with Nelly, and I am so sorry, everyone. I cannot find everyone who I was in this group. Oh, I see you, Chris. I see you, Chris Rudisil. And that's all I remember right now. So, but everyone had some interesting things to say about what engaging with the community is in our newsrooms and our respective workplaces. One of the things that stuck out to me was when Nelly said giving audiences a chance to ask questions about the news, because when you give people a chance to ask questions and critique, that gives what she said was a visible and measurable fulfillment for our audience. And Chris said that community engagement is talking to those who are the most impacted. Oh, actually, wait, no, that's what I said. I'm sorry. And Chris said that engaging with the community and learning what they need in our news coverage is what community engagement means. And then Anne, I think, closed it out as she always does. She said community engagement is exemplified in the statement of Marcus Garvey: the pen is mightier than the sword, but the tongue is more powerful than both. So when people can speak for themselves and speak their truth, we'll have an equitable experience and can get closer to what this country is supposed to be. So that's what community engagement means to our group.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is incredibly thoughtful and thorough. And I know, obviously there's more groups, we're going to have to just move on, although like there's so much like to be said here. And yeah, I mean, engagement is incredibly broad and looks very different from different newsrooms. Also just thinking about what was said, like what does it look like in a corporate, quote unquote, corporate setting versus a nonprofit setting, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot to unpack there and could be like an hour session in itself. So, well, how do we define community engagement? We kind of defined it here as relationship building that enables high-end community participation in and understanding of one or multiple points of the journalism process in order to achieve more trustworthy, accurate, and impactful storytelling and reporting.
Yeah, Resolve's approach to community engagement in journalism, as you speak about earlier, was both a process. How do we do things like relationship building that enables participation throughout the reporting process, and an outcome? What do you want to achieve? So what we want to achieve is more trustworthy, accurate, and impactful storytelling and reporting.
Yes, and speaking of trustworthy, our work includes demystifying journalism and the reporting process when we're in the community, and also helping newsrooms do the same for those community members that they interact with. So we're going to talk about some tips that will take 30 seconds that help demystify the journalism process. Not every interviewee might explain, the jargon behind journalism, because not every interviewee might feel empowered to ask about journalism terminologies like on background, off the record, and be aware of the power dynamic that comes with interviewing somebody when you go to interview them. Also, explain the time frame of a story and when an interviewee should expect to hear from you for a follow-up interview, or when they should expect to see the piece published, so they don't feel like, oh, we had this interview, now what? Also explain that during the editorial process of the story, you have limited time and word count, and what is included from the interview really depends on the angle of the story, which, as we all know, can change. I say this because we've come across folks who have been interviewed, talked to journalists for 25 minutes, and then felt surprised when they saw in the published piece that there were just 2 words they said or 1 quote that ended up in it. So we had a former fellow named Madison Karras at Resolve who put together a really helpful tip sheet called "What's Your Process?" This has tips about how to make your reporting process transparent for interviewees. And there are a lot of suggestions on page 2 of the PDF with these tips. I'll put the link in the chat. Please feel free to review it. I'll drop that right now. So with solutions reporting that serves the needs of the community is one way of building trust and relationships. But what about after that story is published? Continue your relationship with those community members, help interviewees continue the solutions they are creating, whether this is by volunteering or seeking help to seeking solutions or answers to questions that they may have mentioned during your interview that might have had nothing to do with the story you're writing. By demonstrating participation in the process of seeking those solutions, the relationship between you and the interviewee becomes more reciprocal rather than extractive. And I'm going to drop that link right now. It's a bit.ly link for the What's Your Process tip sheet.
Thank you, Valerie. Building relationships is important to doing community engagement work, and we agree, right? So here's a tool that our CE team uses as a part of our process with building relationships with communities by doing deep community listening. We believe that this is a strong tool for newsrooms to build trust in all communities, and we like to call it a sound off, but you can call it something else if you like.
Yeah, and then in a little bit, Gary with the Kansas City Beacon will have more tips to share specifically around how they're doing community listening with the Beacon.
So our sound off is a virtual or a face-to-face event that provides a space for conversation with Philly residents. We focus on topics that are specific to Philadelphia needs and gather questions and sometimes answers for the needs of communities. What makes our sound off so successful is when people felt heard, 1, and 2, trust was built. So we surface informational needs. We elevate perspectives otherwise missing. And yes, sound offs can inform story ideas and reporting, but that's definitely not our goal.
And you'll find that most oftentimes we'll need to return to the same space and do multiple sound offs before really reaching that stage, right? I mean, this is also part of just general relationship building in your personal lives, having multiple points of connection with community that are consistent to demonstrate trust and to really build a deeper connection with folks. So in the past few months since fall 2022, our community engagement team through our Modifier initiative had the opportunity to work with 3 different newsrooms across the country through SJN's labor cohort to really help strategize together, what does engagement mean that would result to better solutions reporting related to labor issues. And this was a really amazing experience. It was a really interesting experience for us as well, just in terms of how do we account for the different goals, audiences, and workplace capacities and workflows of each of the newsrooms and to be able to work to think about how do we integrate certain engagement practices for increased engagement for better solutions reporting. 3 themes kind of came up for us, audience versus community engagement. What does that look like, right? Audience is folks that you already have a relationship with who are already consuming your content and are engaging with the editorial process of your newsroom. So what does it mean to expand that reach? How do you build ongoing engagement to beyond your existing audience? Also about event planning. Actually, I thought this was also thinking about doing thoughtful, engaged event planning that makes it accessible to audiences, both from just designing the invitation piece, as well as, similarly with, what Val talked about, the reporting process, how to continue and extend those relationships beyond that one event. What does the follow-up look like to support a more reciprocal relationship? And all the while, at the event itself, really centering the participants' engagement. So that it's not necessarily, again, about finding a story idea or being able to build your source list, but how do folks walk away with just feeling joy because they just simply had a really great time? And the third piece is thinking about creative and sometimes strategic partnerships, right? And working outside of the journalism space. There's a number of different nonprofits or groups in all of our communities that have a shared, that also serve communities that you're interested in reaching. So how do you work with them to maximize shared resources as well as being able to reach a shared audience? And also, what does that mean in activating accountability or call to action? This was particularly the case with the newsroom partner El Tecolote out in California, and some of the reporting that they've been doing around specific labor policies and working with different organizations, public offices, as well as universities to help activate the enforcement and execution of labor policies. And from there, though, we do want to open it up. And I know there's folks from the 3 newsrooms, Q-Notes Carolinas and the Beacon here, and we want to kind of give them an opportunity to share back their experience are, right? Because these are from our perspective, and that's not a full picture of what collectively we had been talking about the past few months.
Who do you want to go first? Does it matter? All right, I'll go first, if that's fine. And I'm the real Chris Rudisell. The other Chris Rudisell is Jim. I think we logged in with the same link, so that's why, not to confuse people with 2 bald men on the call. But I'll share a little bit, like, on kind of from these like 3 things, like audience versus community, event planning, and creative partnerships. And our experience, first off, working with you 3 was remarkable. Like, it was, I think, one of the best like kind of cohort training things that Jim and I have been part of, where we just felt like we had the space to really brainstorm and be creative and come up with ideas and solve the things that we were dealing with too. It was just, thank you for providing that space. We, audience versus community, we were really starting from a, kind of community engagement where we didn't have this built-in audience coming to events, but now we're in a very different space, even after our first event. I made a comment to Angela earlier that like, we are actually in a space where we could start a reporting project from this community engagement space first and get story ideas to launch a new reporting project versus before. I don't think we'd had that same engagement built in and the tools to do so. Event planning, it was fun. We found a smart local bar place to do our first one that was convenient and accessible for folks, and got a little creative with a specialized drink that people could get if they signed up for an email list. We did not do a program at all, and that was really important. I think it was really successful on just providing an environment where people could talk, where our reporters could walk around, meet people, engage with them, and really just kind of form better community. And from that, we got, I think, like 10 different story ideas. About half of those are working their way through now. We got some great video that we can use for future events, photos, etc. We had one reporter that actually went around the room and did little mini interviews with the community. So that was another success. And then finally, as we move forward, we're really looking at like, what do those creative partnerships look like? And how can we, some of our engagement events don't actually have to be our engagement events. So looking at it from a different lens where we are asking other organizations, nonprofits, community groups to let us partner with them while they host what we are calling our Q-Notes Connect. And that allows us to be part of their built-in community, which is nice. It helps us grow our awareness of the QNOTE's product within the LGBTQ community and kind of our role as a member of the community by partnering with those nonprofits. And Jim, do you want to share anything additional?
No, I think you did a great job. One of the things is we've found in not just have we engaged the community, but we've also increased funding from the community because of our event. And we plan to do this at least quarterly. And I think it's helping with finances as well as community engagement. So that's a pretty important factor.
Yeah, we had one member that doubled their monthly donation the night of our first QNOTE's Connect. And it was specifically because he was just happy to see the work that we were doing in the community.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. What's up, Gary?
Yeah. I think I have like the same vibe as Chris. These are some of the meetings that I was really looking forward to. I don't look forward to a lot of meetings, but these are some of the meetings that I was really looking forward to. And I think a lot of it is because it centered our community engagement to make sure that it was very authentic, not to stress ourselves and be planners all the time, but just chill, step back, and at the end of the day, all you're looking for is authentic conversations with community members. And sometimes that doesn't take a lot. Sometimes you don't always have to plan an event. Sometimes you don't always have to pay for a tabling event. Sometimes it's just about being in that space. And I think that's one of the things that I learned, because at the last tabling event that I went to, I didn't stand behind a table and try to get people there, but instead I was out and about engaging with community members, other people at tabling events, and I got that from y'all. And I think another thing is we were actually having like real authentic conversations about tough discussions to have, whether it's with partner organizations, whether it's with stuff inside of our newsroom. Like there was a lot of like guidance and conversations that were particularly tough for me to have. And had it not been for them, I wouldn't have been able to have these conversations. And because we did, now we're able to move forward with the listening session that we have planned out in at the end of the month, or at the end of the month in April. I'm with the Beacon, by the way.
Thanks. That's awesome. And also Gary has like a whole presentation, and I'm just gonna pass it off to him right now, actually, on how to become a listening newsroom.
Well, that's great transition. So, hi everyone, I'm Gary Enrique Bradley Lopez. I'm the Community Engagement Bureau Manager for the Kansas City Beacon. I'm a former community organizer, community advocate. My past positions have all some way been involved in some type of community engagement efforts in the broader Kansas City community. I specifically live in Kansas City, Kansas. And so I came to the Kansas City Beacon because it was one of the first newsrooms specifically in Kansas City that I had ever seen that really wanted to focus on the community, making sure that they're connected to those members that they want to report out to. And so that was something that made me very excited. Angela, could you give me access to share? So that was one of the things that very much made me excited. But one of the best things that the Beacon did was to ensure that each and every one of their journalists and reporters had a community listening session. When our reporters move into Kansas City or they start working with us, we want to make sure that they are connected with the community members. Oh, that looks like that's not it. Let's see. Stop share. Is this it? Let's see. It'll take me to the link. Here we go. You all see that?
Yes.
I feel like it's not showing the big version. It's playing games with me, but if you all can see it like that, let me see if I can try to present. But you all can't see that, right? Can you see that? You can see the full screen?
Yes,
All right, great. So, yeah, so anyway, so one of the best things is that each one of our reporters and journalists have to actually have a community listening session so that one, they are in tune with the community needs and information and access to whatever beat they're reporting. And then anytime that our reporter has gone through over a year or they want to invest in a project in a specific community, we do another listening session. And then also when we want to build some community partners and really invest in community organizations, then we'll do another listening session. So I'm just going to go through it where we have like a really simple 3-step plan of how to do a community session. You see the next screen? No. Okay. I feel like this, Angela, are you able to hop on and share the screen? It might be better if you do it.
Yep, I can do that.
Thank you so much. So anyway, go ahead, Derrick.
We all love Zoom.
You know, Zoom be doing what Zoom do. But anyways, I think that when we look at the community listening sessions, you always want, people like freak out and they're like, oh, well, that's like a lot of work. And it can be a lot of work. But if you look at it from the 3 angles that I'm going to present to you all, it's going to seem way more simpler. And it's also going to be a process that you're going to see that can become very routine for your organization and something that you're just able to do off the bat, even in like random settings. So do I need to hand the sharing setting back to you, or?
I'm sorry about this. It's not letting me present your camera for some reason.
Uh-oh, do I gotta open it up? Let me see. Well, I can share again, but we're just gonna have it a little janky and it's not gonna be as cute as everyone wants it to be, okay?
That's fine. Go ahead,
If
Gary.
that's cool with everyone, then that's how we're gonna make it work. All right. So anyway, so the 3 steps to doing your community listening session is 1, it's planning the session, planning the communities that you want to engage with, what specific topics, what answers you're looking for. It's 2, listening to your community, taking time to actually engage with them, have these conversations, step back and really listen to them and take the time to understand what they're talking about. And then number 2, taking everything that you learned from that community listening session and then bringing it back, digesting it and just taking it all in and figure out how is it that you can directly serve the community that you just had a conversation with and ensure that your news directly impacts them. So the first one is planning that listening session, right? Like you want to create intentional goals. Who is it that you're reaching out to? Who are the organizations that can be part of this project? What is it that your team, that your organization, that your journalists want to get out of this? And how best you can make use of this time as you're investing with community members. Then that's recruiting. You want to recruit your attendance. So you want to think about who are the organizations that are already doing this work, that are working with these impacted folks on the issue that you're talking about. It's about thinking about who isn't engaged in the media or really know that they could even take part of this and can make impact. And it's also thinking about who is it that you can get in the room and how much of an investment they can make in that setting. And then you want to set an agenda. You can be very lenient. It doesn't have to be very harsh. You just want to make sure you take control of your time. You want to make sure the way that we do it at the Beacon is, we'll do like an icebreaker. We'll have 2 conversational questions. I call the next question is a sticky note question, something you leave behind or you drop in the chat. And then we leave out of there with, some story ideas and great conversations and build relationships. And then you want to draft community agreements. This is something that you want to have set forth. You want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable in the space, that everyone has an opportunity to speak, or if they do not want to speak at that time because it's a tough subject, that's fine as well. But you want to have a set of community agreements everyone can abide by. And if you're working with a partner organization, involve them in that process so they can also have some ownership in it. The next thing is actually doing the community listening session. So you want to build these listening sessions to really understand the community's voice, what it is that they're talking about, what issues really matter. So again, you go back to those guided questions. Now, those are just the questions that set the foundation, but it's the conversation that leads through and gets you what you need. That conversation amongst community members, the conversations that you're having, you really want to take the time and listen to those. And so one thing that we do is we seek to understand, not to respond. I think a lot of times we, as journalists or as individuals, when we are listening to someone, we listen to respond. And so we want to take the time to really just listen to them. When we do listening sessions, our journalists sit back. I'm the one that's guiding everything, facilitating everything, and they'll step in every now and then to do questions, but they won't argue with anyone. They won't say, oh, we've already done this product, because then that's another step to later on email that person and say, hey, I heard you say this at the listening session. Here's a story I wrote about that topic. So, you want to take that time to really let them say what they want to say and what they need to say. And then investing in each other. Allow them to understand that this is an active conversation. It's an active conversation. If there's something that you resonate with or something that you may disagree with, let's have that conversation. Let's invest in each other and make sure that we can share as community members, just good old folk conversation like we used to, and get stuff out of there. And then the third thing, after you're done with your listening session, you sent your email and told them thank you for attending and you're really grateful for all that they did. You want to unpack everything that you learned with your team. And everyone that was in that meeting, right? You want to review what it was that community members said, what they shared. And then you want to start thinking about what are some potential story ideas that would impact these people? What are some things that that were very common, some very common themes that were brought up? What are some issues that they said that the news media wasn't reporting on that we could potentially report on? You want to take all of those community comments and start thinking about potential ideas and then putting them on the calendar. You want to start, planning them with your editor, putting them on the calendar and get stories out. And, start prepping to start doing some reporting on those story ideas. The next thing is evaluating the meeting. Anything worth planning is worth evaluating, is something I always tell folks. And so evaluate the meeting, and there's always room for improvement. There's always room to improve the way that the meeting went, the way that the performance went, who was in the room and who wasn't in the room. And then you start thinking about what it is you can do next. And then share your takeaways. Share with those that were involved in the listening session. Share with your community members, the people, your audience. Share what it is what you learned. And then also share, like, in the future, those story ideas that came directly from the listening session so that people can see the ownership and the power that they have when they are invested in news and information. So a couple of tips, make it your own, make it however you want to make it. A listening session is very simple. All you're doing is listening. You figure out how you want to listen to these individuals. If you just want to have it a nice conversation like Chris and them had at their event, and you just want to open up the space for people to talk, do it that way. If you want to do it online via Zoom 1 hour, you can figure out how to do it. If you just want to pop up at a meeting like this and then just randomly start doing a listening session, you can. But now you have the foundation to do so. And then always have a team to help you, whether it's your own team members, you don't want to do it alone, whether it's investing community members that came to the last listening session and asking them if they would like to take part in it, or whether it's involving actual, organizations that are doing this work so that they can help you ground yourself on the work that you're doing. And then consider how you can potentially engage with these people afterwards. I'm always on the lookout of who can become a community engagement rep, or who can become a community advisory board for our organization, who can be someone that I'm always connected to and can invite, and they just want to do a whole bunch of community listening sessions, or are connected to a lot of people, or are probably part of an organization, and now that's another organization. You want to make those connections. So this picture right here that I have is actually an example. This fall, we had a listening session, a transportation listening session as part of the SJN's labor cohort. And part of that listening session, we really wanted to engage with community members about what is the state of transportation in Kansas City, what's going well, what's going wrong. We want to talk about everything from walkability to buses to streetcar. We wanted to have those conversations. And one of the things that came up in that conversation from a community member who randomly came to our meeting, she said she just clicked on the link. She didn't know she was supposed to be there, but she just stayed because she enjoyed the conversation. And she mentioned that there was a shortage of bus drivers, and that's the reason why a lot of times there are routes that are being missed, buses aren't coming on time, and that's potentially the problem, or potentially the problem why there's certain bus routes that don't reach certain underserved communities. Because of that, our reporter Millie Mansoray, I think I said her name right, wanted a report on that story. That story came directly from a community member, and now came back to start talking about what is currently happening and what is the goal and what it is that they want to see, and share potential solutions to it. So all that came from a listening session. Again, our listening sessions, I think, are one of the most impactful ways that we engage with our community at the Beacon. And it's one of the things that we are always consistently doing. We just randomly connected with an organization, not randomly, we connected with an organization last week and are already on the road to do a listening session on the 15th. So just like that, just being able to have that skill, organizations will really take part and invest in wanting to, have you in their organization invest with their folks as well. So I think I took up my time. I don't know if I have time for questions, but I'd be willing to take some. All righty then.
Can you talk about the kinds of organizations to partner with?
Yeah, so the main thing is, you as you think about what your listening session is, think about what organizations are already doing that work. When we did our listening session around transportation, we wanted to talk to impacted folks. So we reached out to the KC tenants to make sure that they could send individuals that would potentially be having transportation issues. We're doing one on Black maternal health. And so we reached out to Uzazi Village in Kansas City, who's already doing that work. And so, and also it's like, who else do your organizations want to build relationships with? Who are those organizations that are doing work in your community? And you can offer this service. You can offer, hey, we would love to do a listening session and we can partner up, and then you could potentially share our news with your folks as well. And so it's always, you can always be creative with who you invite in the room. You can even do churches, schools, nonprofits, anyone. Kenya, were you going to ask a question?
Yeah, Gary, I was going to ask if you could speak on how your organizing background kind of plays into the role that you play now at your current position, because I think I definitely remember being in college and thinking that organizers really had it down pat when it came to community engagement. So if you could speak on that a little bit, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so I was a community organization for More Squared here in Kansas City, working specifically around education and health issues. And so the main thing about organizing was building relationships. They forced us to have 15 one-on-ones with individuals in the Kansas City metro and build relationship, because the way to build power is by having more individuals, more people, more money, more power. And so when we looked at it that way, it was always about consistently having authentic relationships with individuals, but always looping them back. And so the way that we viewed it in organizing was kind of like a funnel, like everyone that you're trying to serve, everyone you're trying to meet, and like, how do you bring them down from, like, I guess if we look at it from journalism, it's like story ideas, then the story is produced, and now somebody is impacted by their work. And so looking at things from a funnel and thinking about the communities that you serve, but how are you directly serving them as well? And then also taking risk. I think at the here at the Beacon, we take some pretty cool risks with our community members, whether it's listening sessions that may not go well or that may go very well, or partnering with organizations that everyone might not see as an organization that you should partner with. Like, we take those risks. Like, at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. And so you have to be a risk taker when you're doing listening sessions. And then also always thinking about impacted communities and underserved communities. Like, if they're not at the table, then you're just wasting your time, because those, especially for us, are the people we want to serve.
This is Chauncey. So I'm curious about your thoughts on incorporating social media into your strategy and tactics. We've seen certainly, I think we're coming out of this era to some degree in journalism because of all the segmentation and the, what's the right word? Where it's not centralized anymore. Before social media, everybody kind of like watched, the major TV news networks. And then with social media, there's been so much channeling through like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and now TikTok a lot of the times. But there's two, the way I've seen it, like there's two lanes. You got the older folks, particularly in the Black community, that like are legacy media people that watch MSNBC, CNN religiously, and that's where they get their news. And you got younger folks who tend to get most of their news off of Instagram or TikTok and things of that nature. I feel like that there's now these like the stuff that we're talking about and where we fit in is this emerging space, because there's such a dearth of local news coverage, and it's not focused on the people. But I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on how you guys and what you guys do to incorporate social media into your listening sessions and things of that nature?
Yeah, thank you for this question. We'll also make this the last question to pass it back because it was so hard. No, I'm messing with you. I think for social media, we very much use social media to share our news, but also to share our listening sessions, to reach out to audiences, pushing our listening sessions through our social media. But as you were talking about that, I think one of the things, as I talk about listening sessions, one of the things we did this year was do school board forums, and we did them, via Zoom, and then casted them on our Facebook Live. And I was just thinking about the amount of like a listening session type of vibe that we got in the comments of community members that were very engaged in the forum, and these candidates sharing, problems that are going on in the school district that essentially created a whole load of story ideas as well. And so I think there's a way to create these active forums and discussions through your Facebook Live, through your Instagram channels. And then we've also taken the time to everything that we learned from, the school board forums, cut those down and then put them into Instagram reels and then share that with our community members and allow them to also. So journalism is so creative. Y'all got it so easy nowadays. Y'all can really do whatever. And it's just about taking those risks again. So I'll pass it back. Thank you. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you, Gary.
That was interesting. I like that. Does anybody have any questions just in general about me being able to get to talk about our breakout sessions? Is anything that anybody wants to talk about now, or have a question about is with reference to community engagement within your organization?
I do. My name is Angela Bond. I'm with Capital B. In reference to community engagement and listening, one thing I love doing is listening, and I love being in the community. But also with everyone's work, how do you stop listening? And then when does community engagement, because for me, I'm always doing it, right? Always in the carpool line. It doesn't really matter where I am. You can add, my editor is here. I'm always in community engagement and in listening. But as reporters and as engagers, finding that line of okay, right now this isn't on record. This is just empathy, or the building relationship part, because sometimes I feel we can get into that, listening for story, listening for this, listening for that, but there's such a fine line to walk around building relationship listening and then reporting listening. So any suggestions, anything around the different types of listening?
Val?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if Gary wanted to respond, but I'll say really quickly. Yeah, I think at least in my experience, and I'm sure you've had similar experiences, and when people want for me to be an ear to listen, they're very clear about it. The only people will say to me, they'll kind of make it clear when they want me to write about things, or when they say, oh, I think you should know this, I think you should talk to somebody. But sometimes they'll come to me and they'll say, I want to tell you about this, but I'm concerned that if you write about this, something will happen. So for me, I think people have been very clear. And I think that I always assume that what we're talking about is off the record until I say to them, oh, hey, do you want to talk about this on the record? But sometimes people come to me and they'll sit down. The other day I was at an event and somebody sat down across from me and said, off the record, and then just started going into things. So I think, give people the choice. Maybe at first say, if they talk to you and say, hey, could I offer, would you want to talk to me about this on the record? And I think being that ear and building that trust is important first.
I would also add, how you talk to a community member, whether it's not specific to a story, that shouldn't change, right? How you talk to any individual, the kind of the space you want to hold, care, courtesy, whatever it is, that should be consistent, whether it is directly work related. But also want to acknowledge personal and professional life balance is hard to straddle with. And that comes from, background doing organizing and continuing that work outside of Modifier, outside of Resolve. But also that kind of helps us, helps me focus, who do I also want to tune out, right? And I often tune out folks that larger, this again, background in immigrant serving nonprofits, I tune out the larger parties because they have a designated fully staffed director of communication who is English fluent, who knows how to do media access, know how to reporters. So I tune them out. But that allows me to focus on folks who may not know how to use social media, don't really have don't have the funding to have a designated comms person. And like the person who is doing comms is also the operations person, also doing the direct service work. And so being able to better kind of elevate their voice and their stories because they're less equipped with the ability to do so.
Thank you.
I have a lot to say about that, but it's 3 o'clock. I have to be mindful of everybody's time. But we definitely got to do another one where we can really chat for a whole hour just about stuff like this, because I love this type of time when we're doing these workshops. I love this part. But go ahead. Sorry, Angela.
Oh, you're good. I actually just have one more question to close out and then we will stop. Kind of to follow up on that last question, do you record your listening sessions, or is it really just background? Like you're not actually taking quotes from those sessions to apply in stories. It's really just for you to find the story ideas. And then if you want to follow up, you follow up with somebody in your or your reporter does an official capacity. Is that correct?
So we disclose and make very transparent in the beginning that this is on background, and also we will be taking notes that could be shared with our newsroom partners. And when we do share those notes on the very beginning, it says this is on background notes. So, and we don't disclose, we remove names and make sure that participants are anonymous, and that if any reporters from our newsroom collaborative want to follow up on a specific quote or on a specific theme that was surfaced, then we'll kind of facilitate that relationship.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. We really appreciate everybody who could make it today for the Resolve team, CE team, Gary, Chris, Jim. We're really excited to have this as a resource. I mentioned this in the chat, but we will be sending out a recording of this session along with some extra resources, tip sheets, and different things that you can take a look at to start doing some of this work in your own newsroom. You also have my email, and so please feel free to follow up if you need to. Thanks all. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.